What's happening, people? Welcome to By Design. This show will be about introducing what by design is, what you can expect to hear from the show, especially over the next month or so. So, why have I decided to call this By Design? Well, I'm a full-time graphic designer. I got into graphic design around 5 or 6 years ago now, and it's what I love to do. I love to design in general. I love to hear about design, and I think design permeates through everything that we do and everything that we love. I'd consider myself more of a Kendrick Lamar rather than Drake, to use them as binary opposites in a way. I know that they had the beef last year and I'm a little bit past it now. But one thing that I love about Kendrick Lamar's music, for example, is that each line tends to tell a whole story in and of itself. He's very selective with the words and the phrases that he uses and all the different ways of understanding. This is something that I learned a lot through the Dissect podcast. Shout out to Cole Kushner and the folks at Dissect. And yeah, every line is just super intentional with Kendrick. And I think that's what doing things by design is. At the end of the day, it's about being intentional with all the actions that we do and all the decisions that we make to tell whatever story it is that we want to tell, or communicate indeed whatever it is that we want to do. But also it can be quite introspective, living by design and having your own philosophies and choosing those philosophies or coming up with philosophies by design to live life in the way that you want to. I often think that by design is the opposite of by default. So it's about living life and doing things by design rather than by default. So what you can expect to hear on the show is you can hear me yap about doing things by design, my experience as a designer in general, but also I've got some really cool guests coming up on the show as well who have very graciously agreed to join me on this project that I'm doing. And we'll be talking about life, jobs, careers, relationships, society, the world, health, and how these people navigate these different arenas of life, and they do it all by design. That's very clearly the hook of all of this. So to whet your appetite, here are 5 things that I've been thinking about, but also some things that I've been asked about recently in my content journey so far, and what you might expect to hear over the next month or so. So we're now at the start of October. I think it's the 4th of October today at the time of recording. And everyone that I know online is going through this winter arc idea. And I've really been thinking about why we're obsessed, especially me. I love a challenge and unfortunately, I love a fad. And I'm very good at starting them, but I haven't always been very good at finishing them. And I think that's a bit of a human condition. I don't think that's just specific to me necessarily. So we're good at starting, we're not so good at finishing. Why are we so obsessed with the winter arc? Why are we obsessed with starting new things at the start of the year, for example? Or, right now, from October through to February in this winter arc, for example, what percentage of people who start a winter arc are actually going to finish it? The typical challenge that's really been fashionable on social media is 75 hard, which is really hard. And you see a lot of people doing it, and then people started doing 75 soft and things like this, and it kind of defeats the point of it. And it's interesting because we're so keen to start challenges, but then when the challenge inevitably does what it's meant to do and test us, we're also quite quick to dilute the challenge itself. So I've seen, for example, 75 soft and people coming up with their own variations of it, which is fine. Do whatever challenge it is that you want to do. But I think you're missing the point. The point is that it's meant to be difficult. Change and evolution and becoming is often on the other side of difficulty. So diluting that is only going to dilute the result that we get at the end. That's just my take on it. It's something that I've been thinking about, and it's something that you can expect to hear more about as we go on. Another thing is AI going to replace creativity. So before I became a full-time designer, I worked in tech PR specifically, and my main client was Samsung. So I was talking a lot and researching a lot about AI. I think went into the job in 21. So AI was just taking off. I remember when ChatGPT first became available for everyone to use, and it was crazy. And now with ChatGPT, Gemini, Anthropic, all the AI tools that are out there, and Google's just come out with this banana thing, which is crazy as well. One of the major things that happen in the industry that I'm in now, the design and creative industry, is that a lot of people think that AI is going to replace creativity, and as a result, is going to replace their jobs and my job. I've got some interesting, nuanced perspectives on this. I don't think it's as doom and gloom as we're making it out to be. I do think that there's cause for pause, if that's a phrase, potentially cause for concern. But right now, I think we're okay. I think what AI does more is that it reveals and exposes a lack of creativity, true creativity, more than it replaces it. I don't think AI can be creative. I think it can execute really well. And I think it's a shame that we're going to see the erosion of craft. But I'd also argue that technology has always eroded craft. That's always what it's done. It's systemized things that can be systemized. And craft, unfortunately, or fortunately, is one of those things. But again, I've got some nuanced opinions on that. So look out for that episode if that's something that you're interested in. Another question that I get asked a lot on LinkedIn actually is, how did I become a designer? I didn't study design. I didn't even do an art GCSE. I did for A-level maths, Spanish, history and physics. And then I studied Spanish and history at uni and did a master's in history. But when I did my undergrad, I torrented Photoshop. So I had a version of Photoshop on my HP laptop, and I was just playing around with it all the time. Didn't know what graphic design was until my flatmate told me that essentially what I was doing was graphic design, and fell in love with it. Was really interested in communicating ideas through graphics as opposed to communicating ideas through solely words. My university experience, I did history, so it was very essay based, and I found it really interesting to communicate the ideas and stories that I was learning in class through graphics, basically. So really got into graphic design out of uni, went into a job in tech PR, which was great. I learned a lot, met tons of great people, got some opportunities to do creative and design work, but not as much as I wanted to. So in the background, I did a 365 challenge, which I'd highly recommend. I wish I did it earlier, to be honest. It's where you create every day and publish it. And it doesn't need to be great. It doesn't need to get likes. It's just to train the brain and train that creative muscle to come up with new ideas every day. It was fortunate that I was working in PR. There's this whole idea called newsjacking, which is where you essentially take what's trending and create your own story off of what's trending. So you can ride that wave of newsworthiness. And I was doing that with graphics. So at the time, there was a lot going on in Downing Street in the UK, for example. So I was creating quite witty political graphics at the time. And that just trained my creative muscle, as I said, to see what was going on and have my own take on it in a way that would maybe resonate with people. But it's turned out to be quite useful. And I use a lot of that work in my portfolio when I got my first full-time job. In my experience, people certainly care about what experience it is that you've had. But at least for me, my entry role in the creative industries and in graphic design was just because I practiced it quite a lot. Actually, my first role in graphic design, I worked for an agency, shout out Type, when I was at uni a little bit, initially as a researcher, and then I did some design work for them because I put my hand up to do design work, basically. And we did a rebrand, I did some social media work for them. But again, that was really good at working for a client. So this is a brief summary of the episode I'm going to do on how I became a designer and what I'd recommend to myself 5 years ago if I could do it all again. But I'd recommend doing as much work as you can, expose yourself to as much good work as you can, and try to replicate it with your own voice. And then I would say, try to get feedback on what it is that you're doing. And if you can work for a client, definitely do that, because as much as you need to train your ability to create good work, tasteful work, which this 365 challenge does really well, it helped me to find my own voice. It's also really important to take a brief, answer it, and do it accurately, and to make the client happy at the end of the day. The difference between being an artist and a designer is that the artist's work is pretty much self-fulfilling, whereas the designer's work is for a client, and that's just the nature of the industry. You can create a beautiful piece of work, but if the client doesn't like it, then it's not going to see the light of day. Fortunately, unfortunately, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So that, in a nutshell, is how I became a designer. Another thing that I've been asked a lot recently from managers, from family, from friends, we've been talking about if Gen Z are really a fragile generation. And it's interesting. I've already mentioned how I was working in PR, and I was one of the only Gen Zers on the team. And at the time, my clients really wanted to connect with Gen Z. And a lot of the content I was reading, a lot of the research that I was reading was talking about how Gen Z, on the one hand, are a fragile generation, but then on the other hand, they're just not putting up with nonsense anymore, and they're willing to take a stand for things. And again, this is quite nuanced, I think. I think with this, two things can be right at the same time. And I don't particularly think it's anyone's fault or it's any individual's fault. I think it's just the way that my generation have grown up. And before you know it, Gen Alpha are going to be the fashionable generation to try and market to and target. How fun. But I don't think Gen Z are inherently fragile, but that's not to say that there aren't things that we can take responsibility for to do better. I think my generation, we can probably take more accountability of ourselves and focus more on what it is that we can do rather than the political and economic state of the world right now, for example. But yeah, that is to come in another episode. And the final thing, which is more something that I've been thinking about internally, is how to overcome imposter syndrome. It happens a lot. I think I heard a good take from Jimmy Carr on Modern Wisdom this morning, actually. I was listening to it. And he said that imposter syndrome is actually really good. And if you've gone 18 months, I think he said, without feeling imposter syndrome, you're probably not trying hard enough. And there are some people who, for example, say you should try and do something that makes you feel uncomfortable every day. And that is uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that you need to do that. But dealing with imposter syndrome, I suppose it's almost like a sunk cost of trying to achieve things. That's the way that I've tried to frame it in my mind, although it's really difficult to deal with. In the career changes or progressions that I've had, it tends to always come with some kind of imposter syndrome, where I was speaking to my family about this recently. It has sometimes been that you think everyone's in on a joke that you're not in on. That's how it's felt for me anyway. And you're going to get a call saying, we got you, or you got, or something like that. But actually, I used to think that you need to look at the body of work that you've created and rest on that and have confidence in that and think, right, I've done the work, I deserve to be in the room. But that doesn't always work, to be honest, in my experience. It's not a case of just looking at the work and then deciding, okay, I deserve to be in the room now. I think it's a process. It's exposure therapy. I think the more you're exposed to that particular feeling of imposter syndrome at the time, then the better you can deal with it. And actually, there's an argument to say that when you stop feeling it completely and you're comfortable, that's the time to strive again. I think Jamila Jamil's got quite a good take on this. I'm not sure if she was speaking specifically on imposter syndrome, but she says that she treats a lot of new experiences or new jobs, career changes, whatever it might be, as weddings that you haven't been invited to, but you've crashed, and no one knows that you've crashed it, but you get the feeling that they're going to find out eventually. This speaks to the whole idea of you feel like everyone's in on a joke that you're not in on, and eventually you're going to get got or whatever it is. But this is kind of flipping it. You're at a wedding and you've crashed it, but no one knows. And she says, so your job is to have as much fun, dance as much as you can, eat as much cake as you can, and all of these different things before they find out and before you get kicked out. And I really love this take, because the whole point of these spaces that we're in and potentially feeling like imposters, the whole point of that is we need to take as much as we can from it. The old, you probably heard this from like parents or older generations, be like a sponge and take in as much as you can. Take in as much as you can, be selfish, take as much as you can from it. And then once there's no more to take, or once you've taken enough, or you feel comfortable, or you feel like the imposter syndrome isn't there anymore, or to use the wedding analogy, everyone just accepts you for being there and it's fine, then it's probably time to go and crash another wedding. It's probably time to move on a little bit and to progress a little bit further. There's something to be said for being comfortable in where it is that you're at. But I don't know. I quite like the idea of always staying on my toes and moving forward and trying to set new goals and chasing that version of myself in the future. I think that's the only way to achieve, really. But keeping in mind that the enjoyment and the happiness comes from being very present. It's just the future version of us just gives us the compass of where it is that we're meant to go. But the happiness and enjoyment comes from where we're at right now. So those are just a few things that I've been thinking about. And that's taken 18 minutes and 38 seconds, roughly, to get through. And that's just me yapping about what's to come. But that's it for this first one. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you've heard in this episode, then please follow, subscribe, and I don't really know exactly what to do, but do the things that you do for podcasts that you like. Like it if you can do that on this specific platform. But if you could share it with someone who might find this useful, funny, or otherwise entertaining, then I'd really appreciate that as well. But yeah, all that's left to say is thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.